And I probably sound better. Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Brandon and Ruby, where today we are talking about the reality of progress in not only what we expect physique wise, but how our nutrition, how our training, and how what we are able to do in this moment, plus what we've done in the past, plus what we expect out of ourselves, comes into play. Because if we aren't realistic with those expectations, the reality of progress doesn't really matter, because we're never going to move along the continuum. We're never going to move forward in a direction that is able to be sustained. It's going to be a lot of stop starts. It's going to be a lot of detours, a lot of picking the wrong exit on the roundabout, and then having to take yourself back and then completely disorientating yourself because you started disorientated. Without understanding this, you are going to find it really hard to see the results you want in your body. And that is part of the reality of progress, because we can't just expect to see results in our body. That is what's going to set you up to fail. Yes, we're coming into it with vanity goals. Yes, that's probably what got you started. And yes, you want to see something on the other side for it physically and just, physically. But that's the catch, because physique changes are a lagging indicator of all the actions that you're doing. And if you need to take a step back as your first step, then how are you going to make any progress if you're expecting to see really fast results off the bat, when the phase you are in right now, that isn't what's expected from it? That isn't the outcome we're aiming for. The way I like to say it is, sometimes even if fat loss is something that needs to happen right now, sometimes focusing on fat loss in the first initiation of this is the worst thing you can do, because that's what you've been doing your whole life, and that's what's been keeping you stuck. It's not to say that you're not going to lose fat in the process that we start off with, but if you are so focused on it and it's leading to this restriction mentality and that's all you focused on, then no wonder you can't stick to it, because everything on your mind is deprivation, restriction. Oh my God, I failed before. If you don't believe it possible, you're going to keep sabotaging yourself. And I actually came up with this analogy yesterday, and I really liked it. If you don't have the base of your Tetris building built in a way that you can keep adding blocks to it and adding blocks to it, and then what happens if they start coming at you faster? If you never develop the skills and you just try to enter that, because I was listening to a podcast, this is actually really good. Sometimes when people enter something, it's like, well, do you want to have the novice program or the advanced program? A lot of beginners would go straight to the advanced program because it's like, oh my God, I can make gains faster. Well, you're going to have to backtrack a lot, just like Brandon and I spoke about when we were talking about breathing, bracing, mobility, all that kind of stuff. You're going to have to backtrack, and it's going to take longer. And before we clicked record on the podcast, this is another one for your notepad. Before we clicked record on the podcast, we were talking about how there's everyone is giving their blueprints. Everyone's giving you all the information. That's great. But what's the most efficient and effective way there? There's no point being efficient if it's not effective, if it's not in the right direction. And there's no point it being effective if it's going around the bush and it's not conducive to your lifestyle. Then that's not really being efficient for what you need. That is the most effective, but it's not realistic. Efficient might mean something different. And if you're coming at this as skinny fat, or coming at this as completely under muscled, what you think is the most efficient path there might be, okay, let's start, you're bought into eating more. Oh, I forgot I wanted to talk about that. Here we go. You're bought into eating more. You're finally training really hard. The thing that traps you is it feels like you're building muscle really fast, because you're going to gain 3 to 5 pounds at least, which is around 2 to 3 kilos, just from the carbs and glycogen alone. That could even be more. It can go up to 4 kilos, 8 pounds. and then you're training really hard and progressively, that can add another 10 to 20 pounds. That's 5 to 10 kilos. Well, not, but that will be over time, but it's mainly around that 5 kilo mark. So that's 5 kilos plus 4 kilos or 3 kilos that are going to be kind of, these are like the maxes or the averages depending on your build. So you can give or take 1, 2 pounds, 1.5 kilos around that either side. But that's because number one, your glycogen capacity has now increased because you never trained to that capacity and you've never trained fed. You've never trained fueled. You've never had carbs within that. So now your muscles are swelling up, not only from blood, not only from the fact that you're eating more, but you're increasing your glycogen capacity, meaning you can handle more carbs, meaning if we do feed you more, that's going into the muscle. That's not fat, and it's not muscle either. And it's so easy to think that you've just bulked, that you've just built a lot. But no, you need to be okay with having that initial 10 pounds there, that initial 12 pounds. I would say 10 to 12 pounds, 5 to 6 kilos as your initial buffer. This is if you're starting out depleted, carnivore, keto, low carb, dieting, undertrained, undermuscled. That is realistically your expectation there. Now, if we're looking at someone who's more like moderately built, who's still undermuscled, there is still going to be that 5 to 10, not in like 5 to 10, which is about 2 to 5 kilos that we need to account for. So it's not as much, but it is still going to be there for you to account for. And that is going to make things feel really difficult. This is why I do not support the whole let's build muscle in a deficit. That's the stupidest thing you can do. Like, yes, okay. If you're new to training really hard, you might build muscle while we're focusing on a deficit. But I don't give a fuck about the focus being on building muscle. The focus is on fat loss. That's the focus. If you're trying to do both, you're going to get yourself trapped. If you're trying to do both the whole time, why the hell would you want to try to get by, especially as a small female, which is why males are typically saying this, and people that have zero idea of the realistic maintenance and deficit calories of a female. Why would you want to try to live on 1,300 to 1,600 calories for the majority of women over 35 and 40, trying to lose fat and build muscle at the same time, even if 1,300 is a slight deficit or 1,500 is a slight deficit, if that's the way that your body is because you're so undermuscled and you haven't really built up anything because you've been dieting your whole life, because this has been your mentality your whole life. Oh, I can't wait for you to take this. But how can you expect to be consistent with that? Like, there is no, that's like my dinner calories. My dinner calories are like 1,100 calories. There is no freaking way that you can make it through. I'm guessing you eat out. I'm guessing you want to have a social life. I'm guessing you want to enjoy a wine with your husband, ice cream with your kid. How are you going to enjoy any of that if you're trying to get by on such little calories? That is why you never lose fat. That's why you never build muscle, because you're not eating enough to build muscle, and you're not doing what's needed to have an effective fat loss strategy so that it actually works. And that's the trap. Now, I'm really keen to see where you take this, because with it, you also need to understand that just eating more isn't going to build a physique. Just eating less isn't going to lead to fat loss. There's nuance, there's context, and that in itself is so vague. What's eat more? Why am I eating more? Because reverse dieting is bullshit if you don't understand the purpose of it. Most people have this idea that they're going to get leaner, that they still want to see physical changes at the end of a reverse diet, but you're not going to see what you think you're going to see, because reverse dieting doesn't have that purpose. And this is where you get yourselves trapped. This is why you don't believe that things work for you. And this is why understanding the reality of progress is the number one step to you actually moving forward in a consistent manner, because you're going to stop stopping yourself. And Brandon and I are laying it all out on the table, because it's not the know-how, it's the I need to implement this and stop stopping myself. You know what, actually, before I let you go off, someone asked me, I think 2 years ago now, because it was when I wasn't living here, what's the main thing you do in your, like, something about what's the main thing you do in your job, or what do you do in your job most of the time? I'm like, well, I actually no. Like, I was about to say what I usually do, but I realized that it's not really coaching through the training and through the nutrition that gets people results. It's stopping people doing dumb shit. It's stopping, because we do dumb shit. And if you haven't read the book, Predictably Irrational, you really should. It's by Daniel Arley. I haven't actually read the book, but I've read books that touch on that book a lot, that talk about how we are irrational beings. And that is actually a book that's on my list. Humans are never rational. We're never logic. We can expect ourselves to always fuck ourselves over because we don't see things as they are when emotions are at their peak. And especially when we've never actually trodden that path before. So the main thing that both Brandon and I do, because I can easily speak for you because I know that you do this too, and you've mentioned this, we stop people following their first instinct, because that is usually the irrational piece of it. And this is where that efficient and effective path comes in, because just because you can get there really fast doesn't mean it's effective. And just because it's effective doesn't mean that it's realistic for where you are right now. And there's probably a more efficient way.
Yep. I think this is one of those things. Yeah, there's a lot to start with. So I'm thinking where I want to start. Taking a mental break from this whole fat loss ideal, because that is where a lot of people try to live, and then they keep gaining weight. Dan John talks about, like, most people set this New Year's resolution to lose 20 pounds this year, and then they end up gaining 10 instead. And so he would say, like, hey, if you only gained 1 pound, that's a win because you slowed the decline. But why does that happen? We're stuck in first gear and trying to go a lot faster, but you can't go faster until you shift gears. And I think one of the issues too, you mentioned this, where people want the advanced program, and it's really not much different from the beginner program in some cases, in some ways. The more advanced someone is, the more simplified their training tends to look. Oftentimes, if they're natural, there are different things at play when you get into the geared game. But uh, generally speaking, like, it refers more to experience level. And I think where a lot of people mess up is they don't understand their point A. They know their point B, or at least they think they do. And really, like, what I find more often than not, it's not that anybody has a specific point B, because they'll reach their weight goal and they're like, oh, I want to keep going, or I want to do this. They don't really know what they want. They just know they want to be as far away from point A as possible. But if you're asking for directions to, I'm in Texas, if you're asking for directions to Dallas and you're in San Antonio, I'll give you directions. If you ask for directions to Dallas and you tell me you're in San Antonio, but you're in my hometown, you're going to get the wrong directions, because I don't live in San Antonio, and the directions I give you will not work. And so this is where people go wrong, is they give themselves directions, or they look at someone else's directions from someone else's point A and think, okay, that'll work for me. And sometimes it does. Most things will work for about 6 weeks. When I say work, though, did you build muscle? Not really. Ruby already touched on it, was like, you built glycogen. You're storing more water in the muscle. You've got more intramuscular swelling. Like, there's a lot of other things going on. You've got more neural drive. So, of course, you're stronger, but that's purely neurological. A coach that I worked with a while back would say that an exercise isn't even productive for gaining muscle until you're 6 weeks in, because you need good neural drive. The way that this is a tangent, but the way that you determine how much force you're going to put into an exercise isn't by saying, I'm going to fire my muscle fibers a little bit, because when a fiber fires, it's either on or it's off. There's no in between. So the way that you determine how much force you're going to put out is by how many motor units or groups of muscle fibers you fire. And so if you got a new exercise, maybe you're using 30% of your muscle, right? You're very inefficient. And so next week, now you're using more. And the next week, you're using more. You're still not working them at a capacity where you're demanding that they grow, because to make muscle grow, you have to threaten it with death. It has to be convinced, if I don't grow, I will die. So it adapts. But you don't have enough neural drive to produce the kind of force it takes to create that stimulus to grow muscle. So yeah, it probably does take close to like 6 weeks for you to get good enough at an exercise, even if your form is great, for you to be efficient enough at an exercise to use it productively to gain muscle. So what really happened? Well, Ruby already hit it. You gained glycogen, you lost some body fat, and when you lose fat, especially if you're talking to anybody who has even just a little bit of muscle already built, when you lose fat, you'll look more muscular. You actually lost a little bit along the way, but you look bigger, more muscular, stronger. That's just the nature of being leaner. So, okay, you lost some body fat. Great. Is this sustainable? Because if this was a thing you did temporarily, it's not a thing that you're going to keep. My objective when I work with somebody is to set them up for long-term success, which means we're going to build some baseline habits. And this is where, okay, let's forget about fat loss for a little bit. Let's forget about gaining muscle for a little bit. Let's practice the skills that lead there. I used to teach music. Let's forget about playing that song right now, but it is our objective. Okay, what are the pieces and parts within that song? We're not going to start out playing the song if it's way above your level. If you've never picked up this instrument before, we need to learn some basics first. And oftentimes people skip steps. I'm certainly guilty of it. I did it both musically and in fitness, and it led to some injuries and issues, both musically and in fitness. So take the beginner's mindset. Start from the beginning. Make sure that you've got all your arithmetic in. Make sure that you've got all the basics in. And fill in those blanks that tend to accumulate as you skip steps to try and do the advanced program. Because the advanced program only works if you have that foundation of practice with the basics. I will quote it again. Kobe Bryant, I believe it was, said, "I'm the best because I never got bored of the basics." Start with the beginning mindset, get your routine in, and let's establish what point A actually is for you so that we know what direction at least not to go. And then, okay, we can do a fat loss phase, we can do a muscle gain phase, but you need to bear in mind that a muscle gain phase and a fat loss phase don't feel remotely alike, and they don't last even close to the same amount of time. A fat loss phase is quick and easy. We're in and out in a few months at most. But a muscle gain phase, there's no in and out about it. We're going to live here for a long, uncomfortable time. We may do some short fat loss phases in between if you spill over a little bit, but the in and out of it is you're going to be here for at least a year, but likely for the amount of muscle that you need to gain to get the body that you want. And even if you say, I don't want to be big, it's still going to take several years to build enough muscle for you to look small once you've trimmed the fat off. It takes a long time, and for women especially, it takes even longer. You're not going to build as much as fast. Yeah, I had a client once he showed me a picture of Zac Efron, and he's like, "That's what I want to look like." And I was like, "All right, that's going to take a few years." He's like, "Well, he's not big." I'm like, "No, but you're a lot smaller underneath that layer of fluff." This is someone I can be very, very honest with, and we can. I don't speak that way to everybody. Only people who I know are, that's their language. And that was his language. Because skinny dude.
My coach, my coach is blunt, and he said something, because I don't want you to go past Zac Efron. My coach said something to me that completely changed everything. And that's when I was very used to sharing, I want this. This is what I want to work towards. This is what I want to work towards. And I was sharing all these amazing physiques online for him. And he said it once. I didn't take much notice, but the second time he said it, it hit. Ruby, she weighs a lot more than you do right now. She has a lot more. This is how he said it exactly. She has a lot more lean mass. You need to stop focusing on dumb shit and eat more food. Otherwise, stop wanting to look like these people. I don't know how he said it at the end, but he said, stop focusing on dumb shit and eat more food, because they look lean, they look small, but they weigh a lot more because they have a lot more muscle mass. So if you aren't willing to eat more food, then don't keep expecting to look like these people, because it takes a lot more food, it takes a lot more muscle, and it takes a lot more time not trying to get rid of the last bit of fat around your waist or being so focused on less carbs. Eat more food, fuel your training, build the muscle so that you can reveal what you've been wanting to reveal this whole time. Just touching back on that, that fat loss is quick and easy. It's very easy for you guys to say, well, I've been struggling to lose fat my whole life. And that's the fucking point. That is why we don't start in fat loss. We start off building these foundations. We start off getting you to a place where fat loss is a byproduct of the habits that we can now establish because you have a lot more confidence in yourself, because we've set it up to make it easier. Because you're fat loss resistant for the fact that you've been trying it for so long. And when something has been on overdrive, just like leptin resistance, I should say insulin resistance, because no one understands leptin resistance, just like insulin resistance, the insulin receptors have been on high alert for so long that now there has been a resistance developed to it. Your whole fat loss mindset has been on alert for so long that now there is resistance to it, because you're not going to say, oh, I can hold off. I don't need to worry about this treat because I need to make sure that I hit under my calories and I'll be okay going to sleep a little bit hungry. No, you're not going to have any willpower because your willpower battery is drained. You're not going to have any discipline because that battery is completely smashed. It's been rotted. It's been, you know, when you leave batteries in for so long and they just leak. That's what your discipline battery is. You have zero capacity. The willpower, you can build it up a little here and there, and then it's going to drain again because it hasn't been fully charged and you've been leaving it on charge the whole time. So you've weakened the battery. That's the willpower. But the discipline, completely gone. Never going to come back again until you give yourself the ability to get more batteries. And that's going to take energy because you need to get yourself to a shop, and that's going to require energy for you to get there. You need to get yourself to buy it. That's going to require currency for you to get there. That's muscle. That's training capacity. That's energy. Because when you're feeling more energized, you're going to get the results you want. So if you're not seeing fat loss results in at least 12 weeks of diet, actually not even at least, if you are not seeing results within 8 to 12 weeks of fat loss, you are doing something terribly wrong. But if you're not seeing results after 12 months of trying to build something, you're doing something terribly wrong. And usually it's trying to do both at once, or thinking that just training more is the answer, or just eating more is the answer. But no. And then you mentioned the 6 weeks. I just want to keep touching on the things you do so then you can continue on your timeline of notes. And then I'll just interject to add on to the points, and I won't bring up any new points because now you added them. I think this is a good structure. But 6 weeks, you mentioned your drive, you mentioned glycogen capacity. Yeah. But what usually happens? What are we usually seeing results into? We're seeing numbers go up. Yay. Okay. Numbers start slowing down around week 6. They start slowing down even more around week 8. Okay. This isn't working anymore. This exercise isn't for me.
But in reality, it's just starting to work.
Yes, that is when it's just starting to work. I had this conversation with someone because I do lateral raises like 3 times a week. I was doing lateral raises 3 times a week, and I was sharing that. And then someone comes to me and goes, this is on Facebook. They comment, I hate lateral raises. And I'm like, I bet you bottom dollars it's because you can't use much weight and it's because you never progress on them. And he's like, fuck, how did you know? Like, because people don't like doing exercises that they can't lift heavy weights on, that they're not good at, that they suck at, or that they don't see progress on. But the reality is, it's when those things are happening that they're the best for you. Because if you're not seeing progress on it, that's your muscles building, because you don't force progressive overload. If you're forcing progressive overload and seeing increases all the time, there is something terribly wrong with your program. Progress is slow and it's not forced. It is the byproduct of you chasing, beating your best, chasing, training to form failure. And over time, that form failure is going to be with an extra rep, with an extra 5 pounds, with an extra 2.5 kilos, with an extra 1 kilo. Get some micro plates, guys. And that is what builds muscle. The last one that you said that I think is important is where not to go. Don't just look at where you are now. Look at what hasn't worked before. Why have you kept yourself stuck in those same cycles? Because they're the same things that we need to keep an eye on moving forward, because then we can pull them up and say, hang on, why didn't you see results before? Oh, it's because 4 weeks in or 4 months in, you decided to go into a fat loss phase because the scale went up, because you started to feel uncomfortable, because it's summertime and now you're really getting iffy in your clothes.
Yeah, when people chase fat loss and muscle gain at the same time, they tend to get the worst of both worlds because they interfere with each other. So yeah, you touched on this, like people looking the same year over year. they are changing their program too often. Like, oh man, my progress really slowed. I got really strong and then it stopped. So I stopped. Like, well, it was starting to work and then you switched exercises right before it got effective. Because when you're gaining muscle, it's very small amounts. It's not ounces or pounds at a time or kilos at a time. It's grams and micrograms at a time. And I've got a little note list here of some key takeaways for y'all that we'll go over at the end of the podcast for like, okay, how do I apply this now? What can I do today to get on the right track and course correct a little bit? But we'll save that for later. Something that is worth bearing in mind is when it starts to work is probably when you're going to feel like it's starting to stall out. But there are a couple of mistakes people make in that regard. Sometimes, like in a case of a lateral raise, okay, it's actually probably just starting to work because you're at week 7 or you're at week 6. It's a range. It's not an exact exact number, but you finally got efficient enough that you found your actual strength ceiling. So okay, now I want to see an extra rep every week, but cleanly or half rep. Since we're going to with lateral raises for sure to failure. I want to see less body English, you swinging, right? Maybe you got more control. Maybe you made a better mental connection with the muscle, right? But I think the thing to bear in mind here is to fall in love with the process. When we're trying to build the muscle that gives us the shape that we want, it is so slow that it's kind of like watching grass grow and trying to get excited about it. Like you can't. What you can do is you can focus on the actual process. The people who are the most successful in the gym are those who look forward to lifting, or those who just make it so much a part of their routine that they never skip. And this is where I want to hit on bad workouts and good workouts. Most workouts are not going to be a great workout. You're going to have a lot of bad ones, and the bad ones are more important than the great ones, because the bad ones are the ones that are helping you maintain what you have built when you would otherwise be losing it. If you skip that workout, you not only skipped the stimulus to build more muscle, you skipped the stimulus that would maintain what you've built. And if it's new muscle, it's going to be a lot easier to drop and a lot harder to maintain. So every time you
take that one even more, that part, I think this part needs a lot more airtime, because if we can start to see things in that, because there's functional muscle building, which is the where you are pretty much building it in a way that builds more myonuclei, which are muscle brains. But then there's a sarcoplasmic one, which is the temporary one until you start to reinforce that new muscle. And the longer that you've been lifting, the more that it stays. But that, I feel like this is really important to touch on, because people either they either freak out that they're going to lose it really fast, or they go about it the wrong way and they end up losing it anyway. And because you mentioned that, no, you just missed out on the stimulus. Lifting weights just ensures maybe that you'll keep it, because it also depends on where your nutrition is and how you're actually training. You could be training just enough to keep it. And I had a client say to me, because she was so stressed out, she's like, well, I don't feel like there's a point during the session, so I lose all motivation for it if I know that I can't give my best and train to failure. I'm like, well, just because you can't train to failure doesn't make that session a waste, because that is enough to just maintain. And the thing is, if you're still training at whatever your max is for that day, there is nothing to say that you aren't slightly building there. But at worst, you're maintaining, and that is all that matters. I think,
and that's at worst. That's worth bearing in mind. Like, even if you're not training to absolute failure, if you're leaving a few reps in the tank, now the part where people go wrong here, the reason we tend to push, hey, train to failure, is because where you think failure is and where it actually is tend to be two different numbers, especially when it comes to legs. When I've got a client in here, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's worth going over. When I've got a client in here who I'll say, okay, we're going to do this leg exercise to failure, and they'll get to what they think is failure, and I'll tell them, do another one. And they're like, what? Do another one. And they do another one. And I say, do another one, and then another one. They get 10 or 12 more reps than they expected. They thought they hit failure at rep 8. They hit failure at rep 17. Okay, now we know where your actual ceiling is. The thing is, it feels a lot worse than you expected. Caveat, is this something you should do in your first year of training? No. What you should do in your first year of training is establish a difficult but manageable load for a set of, I usually start people at 8, but it's less important what specific rep range. It's more important that you establish a baseline and increase it. And then just titrate up. But again, we'll come back to the what to do in a bit. Where was I going?
Wait, go back to that thing, Nate, because I still feel like that's a really important part to mention. I feel like this is where the reps thing, I don't like the whole 11 to, this is a side tangent before I get back to what I wanted to say, because I just thought of, you just mentioned reps. This is why I really hate the whole you don't have to lift heavy thing that's now coming out. And that is kind of making women feel like they're heard and validated when they feel afraid of hurting themselves. Because
it's too relative. It's too subjective. It's because like heavy, the reality is lightweights are way harder than heavier weights because they're way more exhausting. When you do a lightweight correctly, it hurts more. It burns more.
That's the thing. People don't understand that. And this is the thing that I'm getting. So I'm really hoping that we can go for another half an hour. Oh my God. But I'll trim that part out. But this is that whole high reps thing makes you fatigued. It makes you tired. So you feel like you're training to failure, but you're so far away from failure. You're just tired. And when you're a beginner as well, you don't understand the difference of that. But beyond that, the 11, 12, 15, 20 reps, that isn't really functional muscle building. Muscle building comes from building that strength and being within those effective ranges. I always think that the 6 to 12 rep range, 6 to 10 rep range is the most effective place to be, because once you hit rep 3, rep 4, if you're using the right weight selection for it, not doing like 10 kilos when it should have been a 20 kilo weight because it's less, like you need to pick the right rep for the rep ranges. The rep ranges just guide what weight to use. It's not, hey, let's just pick up this weight and hit this rep range. It's no, they're telling you.
That's the big piece. People think if I stop at rep 12, it'll magically work. Like, no, if you stop at rep 12 and you could have done 20, it'll magically waste your time. If you stop at rep 12 because you couldn't do 13, it worked. I think with load and rep ranges, I think there's value to high rep ranges and value to low rep ranges. You're probably going to see more long-term success if you focus on both of them. Not necessarily simultaneously, though my own training, I personally like to do them concurrently.
That's what I was going to say. I think simultaneously is the best way to do it, because I think people don't understand this part. You lose the adaptations that you just trained. If you're going from like 3 to 5 reps to then 12 to 20 reps, you're going to lose the adaptations you had with the lower rep ranges. And that's not how periodization works. You need to keep those abilities to use those rep ranges within that program. And the whole myth of periodization, which I think you would like to talk on as well, that whole myth of periodization, like, yes,
I have a lot to say about periodization.
Yes. It's like that whole myth of periodization, just like there is a myth of periodization with bulk and surplus, and this leads to everything. There is no such thing as periodizing your nutrition, bulk, cut, surplus in that sense. It's you're either in a deficit or outside of a deficit. Everything flows together. They're not succinct phases. You can go between maintenance and surplus. When I say that I built for 3 years, I was not in a surplus for 3 years. I was in a surplus for quite some considerable time. And at some point, that became my maintenance. And then I cruised on that at a higher body fat, at a higher weight for a longer period of time. And because I was fueling in that higher calorie surplus maintenance rep range, I'm going to say, because it's not really rep range, but I want it to like link together. Because of that, I was building a shit ton of muscle. I only did one cleanup phase, if that's what you want to call it, in that whole time. And it was only for 3 weeks. And I lost 4.5 kilos in 3 weeks. And it was spoke to me. Like, I could not believe it, because I struggled my whole life, not my whole life, but for 3 years, literally 3 years, to get the scale to go down, because I was in a weight class and I got to a point where my body was so stressed, my hormones were so fucked, that I had to do a 5 kilo weight loss cut overnight. I only lost 1 kilo in my actual weight cut for my sport, powerlifting. but I could not lose that 6 kilos. And he wanted me to move up a class, but I was going to go for the records. I actually got the records, by the way, and I probably still have them because I was a junior when I got these. It was awesome. I got the totals, the deadlift, the squat, and the bench. But the thing is, this is the catch, because if you only tie, I just remembered what I wanted you to go off to lead back into what you were saying. If you only go off, because that 6 weeks that you were mentioning, that's not the only thing that progresses. It's the numbers that are on the book. But if progress is only things that you can measure, it doesn't matter that you can measure it. You have to make sure that what you're measuring is actually what moves you forward in the right direction. Just because you're measuring it doesn't mean it counts. Just because something can be measured doesn't mean that you should measure it, because it can take you in a completely wrong direction. And if we're only going to base it off, let's just say, oh, cool, I saw progress, I feel really good in this fat loss phase, let's keep going, you're going to stay stuck there. And if you only base progress of what you do in the first 6 weeks, it can be the worst program in the world and you feel like you see progress on it. If you keep using that as your base of success and your base of what works moving forward, you're going to fuck yourself over, because everything, even the most stupidest program in the world, works until it doesn't. And only the smart strategies that have logical progression and logic to it, full stop, are going to move you forward. That's what I wanted to say. There we go. Now you can go. I remember.
I'm still hung up on periodization.
Go. Moving
Yeah,
together,
I think
they're related.
yeah, this is one of those things where, and I think this is probably one of the things that holds people back the most, is majoring in the minors. We would call it mowing the lawn while the house is on fire. Worried about all these little details of like periodizing your approach, which yes, I would classify what we do as periodizing, because the definition there is to potentiate the following phase. And you're not going to, if your current 1 rep max of a given lift is 200 pounds and you want to go to 300 pounds, then you're not just going to jump up and do 300 pounds. You're going to have to progress your way up, which to me, that's just periodizing, because you're potentiating those gains with the previous phase. Can you do all of these other fancy things, conjugate training and all that stuff? I have my own thoughts on conjugate. That obviously was effective for some very high level lifters that were all geared. And it can be effective for very high level lifters who aren't. But for reasons other than, I think, the ones on the books and the ones that people tout it, I think real conjugate training is having Louis Simmons standing next to you telling you what to do and telling you, okay, you hit a PR, now go home, rather than being married to the spreadsheet and doing the program. Conjugate training was Louis. It wasn't a program. Although, if you want to learn more about it, Dave Tate has some great talks on it. But that is a digression and not really useful for you, the listener. You, the listener, need something that is doable and not overly complicated, because in my experience, the more complicated you make something, the less effective it becomes. I think it was Einstein who said, make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. And so the simplest approach here, we can talk about myofibrillar hypertrophy and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, and we can talk about rep ranges and load titration and 1 rep max percentages all day. That's not going to help you. What's going to help you, and what still helps me and any other lifters that I have, whether they be very high level or straight up beginners, is the exact same approach of being very simple with our movement selection, with our load selection, with our volume titration. So where do you start? You start with 6 to 10 exercises that feel really good in your joints, and you can take through a full range of motion that have a low floor and a high ceiling, in terms of I can use very little weight and I can use a whole lot of weight. And you take those exercises and you practice them. Don't go to the gym to work out. Go to practice. Get really, really good at the skill of lifting, because as you acquire that skill, the muscle will grow. Don't worry about the triggers for growth. Don't worry about the specific stimuli. Don't worry about it. If you're dedicated to the process and you practice and you just get really good at, we could say the powerlifting big three of squat, bench, deadlift, and I would add chin up to that. If you got really good at just those 4, you'd build a pretty.
I want to add bent over row because I feel like the bent over row shows so many weaknesses. If you cannot progress a bent over row without lifting your torso above parallel, or you can't perform one in general, holding that horizontal torso, then you can't hinge properly. You can't brace properly. And you're going to have really weak erector spinae, which is needed for so many other things. If you can get really strong in that one as well, I would say you have a phenomenal physique.
I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. So you could pick. I kind of look at it as like one hip dominant, one knee dominant, one push, and one pull. I might do 2 pulls. Chin up and bent over row are my personal favorites.
Vertical and horizontal. That's why.
Yeah. But if you got really good at those, and those aren't for everyone, by the way. Like I don't have very many of my clients back squat. In fact, I think I have only one doing it out of a much larger roster. Most people, we use a different implement, but we do squat. Everybody squats.
I was going to say that. What are your, I want to just quickly have a 2-minute segment on squats. What are your favorite variations for squats, and where do you typically start people who have a grip on back squatting and then those who don't? So for me, I'm going to mention two of my favorites that I used to work with. So my favorite one to start clients off with is the cyclist squat with your knees and your toes pointed out. If you have a history with barbell squatting, but they just suck. But I also incorporate something that I usually go against, and that is stretching. I love doing couch stretches before it, and I love doing Bulgarian supersetter with couch stretches because you need to reinforce the actual stretch that you do. Actually, just a quick note on stretching for this. Stretching is the most ineffective, like stupidest thing you can do if you're just going into the position. Stretching isn't just to go into a position. You need to actively think of using the muscles and contracting them, because I see so many people just going into a couch stretch. You're not thinking about actually putting force and trying to push into it to get the stretch through the back leg or to squeeze it back.
We would say, make it active and fight for millimeters.
There we go. And this,
don't just
the reason I wanted to mention on that is because people do the same thing with their lifting. You don't lose tension at the bottom of reps. People lose tension all the time, and people lose tension in the eccentrics. Like in a squat, they will lose that tension at the bottom. Or when they're doing lat pull downs, they'll lose that tension there. Or when they're doing pullovers, as soon as they come up to the top, you lose tension, which is something that I got picked up on in my pull-ups as well. Usually I'd like doing a dead hang at the bottom, but because I'm struggling with my pull-ups so much, and dead hangs usually make pull-ups harder, I'm now needing to keep tension there so I can build my pull-ups back up, because my pull-ups have got so weak because they haven't been in focus, and now I want to focus on them more and they suck. But this is the thing, like you need to keep tension. And if we only chase, the only reason I brought this up is because if we only chase numbers, we're going to skip the very things that we need to make sure those numbers keep increasing.
Yeah. It's numbers within the context of the movement quality. If the quality is going down and the numbers are going up, you're not progressing. You're just arbitrarily increasing numbers. If the numbers are going up and the quality is improving, you're progressing. That's what we want. That's the ideal.
And that's exactly why we need to make sure we're getting full range of motion like all of the time, because that standardizes the reps. Like don't cut something short. You need to have the standardized reps there. But yeah, I like doing the cyclist squat. Sometimes I would put it first if I feel like they can get into that first. Sometimes I'll do structural backloading, which is doing a bunch of the other things and leaving the main event as the bottom thing. So we have like the entree or the dessert, and then the more entrees and all the antipasto platter things to start with that are related to the cuisine we're cooking. And then the actual main dish is the last one. This is the way that my mentor explained it to me. So the meat and potatoes come at the end, but everything else is supporting it. We're not going to have freaking Indian bullshit if it's a friggin' Chinese dish, and we're not going to have Chinese bullshit if it's an Indian dish. That kind of thing.
Where does the Vegemite fit in?
Oh my God, Vegemite goes into every single thing. Vegemite goes in, like, I'm not even kidding.
I've never had it. I just saw something you were like ranting on it the other day.
Always, but there was this TikTok viral thing where they put Vegemite into us ice cream sundae, and it tasted like caramel. That's the only reason I mentioned it. But anyway, back to the thing. I've never tried that because I don't eat ice cream. I don't really do dairy aside from ones that come with lactase, like this particular yogurt brand that I buy. But regardless, I like doing sackless squats. That's one of the ones I love doing because that huge heel elevation not only forces you to use less load, but it helps you hit depth and it gets you focusing on different things. And then if someone isn't so versed in barbell squats, I like going to a counterbalance squat first and then into a goblet squat or a landmine squat. I typically go with the landmine squat first, just because it kind of forces you into a position. And then I go to the goblet squat. How about you?
Excuse me. Yeah, we tend to keep it. We have a very specific system of progressions that we'll use and lateralizations when necessary, bearing in mind that a lot of our clients are high mileage. So one, we have a rule: we elevate the heels on every squat. That doesn't matter if you have excellent ankle mobility. The squat, we're not using it for your ankles. We're using it for the rest of you. In my mind, for the record, the squat is not for legs. The legs get some stimulus. The squat is a systemic lift. So to me, when we're doing a bilateral squat, we're using it to train the entire system, and the legs are probably going to get some. They should, especially when we elevate the heels, because it keeps you more upright, and now you're actually using your legs more. So our progression, our default starting point is usually a goblet squat, but we establish, I want to see you, one, I want to see that you're able to relax at the bottom. I'm not going to load you until I know that you can relax at the bottom of a squat, because if you can't relax there, then you don't actually own that position from a nervous system standpoint. Once I know that you can relax at the bottom of a squat, and we have different tools to get you there, and we do tend to get everybody there, provided there's no permanent structural change, some damage. We have some hip replacements in here that they're not going to get as low as someone with their naturally born hip, but they'll get a lot lower than you think. The knee replacements are a little bit more limiting because they just run out of range of motion and they won't go any lower. But that doesn't prevent we've got a guy who's almost 70 and he'll still squat a couple 100 pounds well below parallel with a nice long, literally, he'll pause for 5 seconds down there with 200 pounds on his back and stand back up. And this guy's almost 70 years old. He's got both knees have been replaced. And so our rules on squats, I want to see you own that position first. But most of our people will start with a basic goblet squat because it fixes a lot of issues. Once you can goblet squat around 60 pounds for a set of 10-ish, we'll put you on the safety bar. I only teach people how to back squat if they really want to learn it, and if it's going to have a lower orthopedic cost for them. There are those for whom it will not be, the juice won't be worth the squeeze. So I don't let them. If they want to do that, they can go somewhere else. Again, as we mentioned earlier, I don't know if we mentioned it during the recording, but our job is to protect people, oftentimes from themselves. Our job is not necessarily to just instruct exercise, but to keep you from making mistakes that are going to haunt you.
Because then it's not effective. That's just being efficient, but it's going to hold you backwards. So it needs to be
nobody's making gains while they're injured. So rule number one is no one gets hurt training. If you're getting hurt training, we didn't do our job. Rule number two is train to reduce the incidence of injury outside the gym. So if we're thinking athletes, there's no such thing as injury prevention. Things are going to happen on the field, but there is injury reduction. We can make you more robust. We can make you tougher. And so the job there is I think of it like in a race car. If the tires are doing this, we can build a bigger engine, and we're definitely going to build a bigger engine, but we also want to do this so that your movements are very, very efficient and high powered. So now it costs you less to put out the same amount of force, but you're going to put out more force because you got a bigger engine. So not only is it costing you less, you're gliding better, you got better aerodynamics, if we're sticking with that analogy. The tires are straighter, the engine's bigger, it's louder, it's scarier, it hits harder, it runs faster. And if you're a grandmother chasing your little grandbaby, then you can play harder and longer and not hurt your knees. You can get up off the floor. That's a favorite of mine. So squat progression is really, really simple in here. We do have a couple of lateralizations and other options, but typically we stick to the functional stuff because I'm of the mind that form follows function. Can I get a tiny bit more hypertrophy out of leg press? Yeah, probably. Does it improve my function in the squat? I haven't seen that happen. No, I've seen it go the other. Yeah, we've said that before. I've seen it go the other way around. But the other limiting factor there is like I have so many square feet. I don't want any pieces of equipment that will only be used one time a week. We have to think efficiency, and we also have to think bang for your buck. So like I'm going to get a lot more out of a squat. Does that
There's
mean I won't ever program a leg press for somebody who has one? No, I'll definitely throw it in there, but it's kind of low on the totem pole in my mind. ROI's down there. So
I
squat
mean,
progression,
I just want to
pretty
say, for
simple.
me, leg press is my favorite exercise ever. It's the only one that my coach will let me do 4 sets on. And that's only because I wrangled him to give me 4 sets on it because I love it
Yeah,
so much. So
it
he
does
will,
have a lower systemic cost. You can hit the legs a lot harder, but for me, in our context and what we're trying to do, we're not exclusively hypertrophy in here.
this, that's
We're
exactly what
function first,
this is
and
exactly what
so
I'm talking about, that context piece. Sorry, because I wanted to throw this one back at you so you
mhm,
don't go on the tangent without saying this. This is the biggest part of it all, because just like we're mentioning, we need to set the realistic expectations of what to chase. Our next podcast is going to have to be on anti-diet culture versus diet culture to elucidate the nutrition impact of this, because that's something I did want to touch on, but that's the next one. But for this one, it's exactly what you mentioned, where we want to build muscle, we want to lean up, we want to see shape, etc., etc. But it doesn't mean that this was one of my big mistakes, which is why I want you to touch on it. Not every exercise needs to be maximizing hypertrophy, because you're not going to
yeah,
maximize hypertrophy if you're going to get injured in that process. Like, we still need to make sure that we're keeping things nice and subtle. We need to make sure that we're working on mobility, not
mhm,
mobility, on ranges of motion, and working on the things that are your weak points. It might mean that you can't use a lot of weight on it all the time, or it might mean that we're doing some accessories that don't feel like they're maximizing that muscle
yeah.
tissue growth. But
No,
without
we do a lot of exercises in here that I would call the secret sauce, because it's more like, all right, we're not building a bigger engine. We're maybe not even aligning the tires, but we are tightening the timing belt. Because if you've got a big engine and your car is beautiful and in great shape, but your timing belt is off, you're not going to make it out of the driveway. You can't use that horsepower you have. So we have a few exercises that were born in physical therapy that I have seen have a whole lot of carryover to performance. And I have found that when we put them during your rest period between some other exercises, like the rear foot elevated split squat or variants thereof, we'll put some specific secret sauce exercises in there in between sets. And we find that every set is successively better and every week is successively better. And you're more skilled with that movement so that the instability is no longer an issue. And now you're getting a lot of hypertrophy out of that. I would even argue probably more as much, at least as much hypertrophy out of that as you would out of a machine lift, except you're also getting the functionality out of it. And so you're getting a more complete and, in my mind, proportional physique built, because again, form follows function. You can go and try to train your glute medius in isolation of your glute max and waste a whole lot of time, or you can get really, really good at single leg training and build the whole damn thing all at once
I'm
in the
sorry, but
way.
you're never gonna see me doing friggin' kickbacks ever. You
No,
never. I
same.
whenever I got program kickbacks, I refused. Like, there is no way I'm doing either a
No.
kickback or I am doing some form of adduction-y thingy with
Adduction.
a
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, just like
Outside of outside of a rehab context, those things, and that may be on the continuum of single leg stance training. Maybe you don't even have the balance because you're a 73-year-old woman and you've never trained it before and you don't have good single leg stance. Okay, maybe we do something to wake that up. Maybe I wouldn't use a kickback, but maybe we use some kind of banded mini
kickbacks.
band walk or
I
something
will,
to
I will
to
say that
wake it up
the
and
kickback
practice.
the kickback as in a kickstand, that is something that I do agree with. Like, the B stance. If you can't do it on one leg, do a B stance instead, because I would still argue that that still challenges you a lot more in that glute medius, glute minor region
Yeah, for
than it
sure.
would being double stance.
For sure. And there are a few ways to approach that, and we've used several of them. I have my own current favorites, and I'll probably change my mind on which ones are my favorite again here in a few years. But right now, what we're currently using, I'm very happy with. I do like the B stance stuff. I found in our context it was really hard to teach. So as much as I like it, I only like it for people who learn it quickly. So I don't use it quite as often as I'd like to, but I do like it. But anyway, for that, for that woman who doesn't have very good single leg balance, like if you get better balance, and by the way, balance is very dependent on the control and mobility of your big toe, your ankle, and your hips. So this is where more of that active stretch, active range of motion work, like 90-90 posterior hip cap, ankle dorsiflexion, active ankle rocks, can be very, very helpful to improve balance so that you can get the most out of your exercises, and use these single leg exercises to build the whole system in proportion. You'll find that it naturally takes the proportion that is pleasing to the eye because, again, form follows function. If you're very, very good on one leg, odds are the muscles of that leg and the torso attached to it are in very, very good proportion and balance, and you're going to like what you see in the mirror. And if you're stepping on stage for a show, the judges are going to like what they see. That's been my experience with the people I've trained who have stepped on stage. And I am biased, admittedly, but I think that we're onto something. So I'm going to put my foot down there and say single leg training is for legs, bilateral training is for the system. And that's the end of my rant there.
No, I think this is really important if we're going to tie it up here because we have a cutoff point. But next week, hopefully, we get a longer podcast out to you guys for anti-diet culture versus diet culture, because I feel like there are some amazing lessons we can learn from diet culture, and also some things to be aware of from anti-diet culture that stop us actually moving forward. However, I feel like this is a really important thing to take forward, because when it comes to the realistic expectations of progress, the most fundamental thing to first understand is, now I can read this post, I was meant to read it to start with, reaching a certain number on the scale doesn't magically mean you're going to get the body that you want. Sometimes it means your body is going to look way worse, as counterintuitive as that sounds, because it's Goodhart's law. If we only have the focus as let's weigh less, the actions that we're going to take become the goal. So now the eating less, the less carbs, all that we are now putting into the system is leading to worse body composition. We need to start focusing on body composition, on metabolism, and on muscle mass, not on losing weight, fat loss only. We've pulled the fat loss lever for most of our lives, because if you're in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, that is the only lever that we've ever been taught belongs in a car. We were given a friggin' automatic car for our bodies. Yet what we need for our bodies is a manual car so that we can actually change the gears when we need to change the gears to move in the direction and the, you know what I mean. That was a really bad analogy, that one. Regardless, we want to pull the right levers, which in this moment, it is not the weight loss thing. And if we think that, going back to seeing really fast progress, you are not going to build muscle and lose fat at the same time past newbie phase. And if you keep expecting the results from your 20s when you were doing dumb shit, because we all did dumb shit in our 20s. I used to train twice a day, and I even got to a point where I was wanting to train 3 times a day. I had the time for it. You don't have the same recovery capacity now. Your body is in a place where it needs a lot more structure. You can't wing this anymore. Regardless, it can have you looking worse. Sometimes weighing more leads to a better physique, but weighing more does not always mean a better physique if all you focus on is let's eat more food. Reverse dieting is bullshit. Eating more to boost your metabolism or to build muscle is bullshit if you don't know how to train for the physique that you want and make sure that that fuel works. I hate saying earn your carbs and I hate saying earn your food, but literally it works together. There was something that you said before. Fuck, I can't remember it. Yeah, it works together. Oh yeah. You said that there's going to be a bigger engine for us to drive and get more out of that for less time, for less bang for buck. This part's important, because this is why fat loss is so much more efficient, so much easier if you build a shit ton of strength first. Lean comes from being strong as hell, because you get a lot more bang out of buck in your sessions. You hold on to muscle a lot easier. that is where this ties in with what we mentioned before with holding on to muscle a lot easier. You're going to lose that so much faster if you don't do a proper building phase for at least a year to make sure
And something to bear in mind with muscle too is, I'm sorry, something to bear in mind there too is the longer you have it, the easier it is to keep. If you've only had it for a short time, it's easier to let go of. Your body will let it go more, or be more willing to let it go than if you've held it for several years. If you've only had it, you just got it this year, you probably need to maintain for a pretty good while if you really want it to stick.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it's not to say that you don't need to lose fat, but the look that we are looking for is not built from one fat loss phase that we keep on riding home until we get to the lean body that we expect, because you're never going to see that lean body. No one diets their way to a killer physique without spending enough time building muscle first. And this is probably what's going to lead into our next podcast segment. I thought that I had to get lean enough first before I allowed myself to eat more food, before I allowed myself to build muscle, well, to focus on just building, because the beliefs back then were you needed to get lean enough to actually build muscle, but that's not true. Like, we know that's not true. And you're never going to get the lean physique without building sufficient muscle first. So if you're dieting most of the year, and if you're trying to build muscle with a dieting mindset, you're still never going to get there. If you're eating more and reverse dieting with the expectations of seeing your physique change dramatically, be very well prepared to be disappointed, because
be realistic with your expectations there.
You're robbing yourself of the very thing that you need to see the shape that you want, to see the definition that you want. And if you're not comfortable if you're not willing to get uncomfortable, then you're going to be uncomfortable for your whole life, because right now you're already uncomfortable. Like,
a little bit of discomfort now for a year or two is going to be worth the time, because you're gonna spend some time being uncomfortable. You could spend the rest of your life being uncomfortable with the results you didn't get, or you can spend a couple of years at most being uncomfortable, working on building the muscle that you needed to then diet down and reveal the physique you've always wanted, so that you're no longer uncomfortable. It'll be more uncomfortable, but for a shorter period of time. So you can just think of it as front loading the discomfort.
Yeah, exactly. I want to tie this up with something that I feel is extremely important. You want the results of a lean and strong sculpted physique. You are sending a goal body to your coach. I bet your bottom dollar that you do not know what that goal body weighs, number one. And number two, the bodies that you are looking to, the physique that you so desire to build, that same person is one who spent at least a year, probably even at least 2 years on building the physique, not on dieting. That person that you're sending your coach had to spend time away from focusing on the scales. And
it's something to bear in mind too, with the type of training that you see. I think, sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's worth noting. Like, if we're going to look at other people who are successful, sometimes they'll show people who, especially Hollywood, who are doing very ineffective training and still building killer physiques. What they're not showing you is the part of the training that actually built the physique. The battling ropes and all of these things didn't build their physique. Burpees didn't build their physique. It didn't. What built their physique was progressive overload over time, a long time. And then they're showing you the fancy stuff because that sells, that'll get the ratings up, right? That's what gets people to watch. Nobody, if you watch an effective training video, what you're going to see is the same thing over and over and over year. It's boring if you look at it from the outside, because it is pretty much the same thing every time, with just a tiny bit of difference in load or volume or positioning. It's the same thing. And so the boring stuff doesn't get aired. So when you look at these physiques and you're like, oh, well, this is how they train. No, it isn't. With some exceptions. When you see them doing the battling ropes and running the hills and doing all that stuff, all you're looking at is their cardio. You're not looking at the part that built the physique. The part that built the physique, I've seen so many now. I've seen several like instructional videos from people who are, they've got the physique, and the instructional videos they put out, this is my workout. No, it isn't, because I've seen your workout, and your workout was under a barbell, and what you're showing is not. These are two different things. So it's worth bearing in mind that if you want what they have, you'd have to do what they used to do to get where they are. Don't do what they're currently doing, because what they're currently doing is probably a tangent they went off on, and that's why they're stuck. But if you do what they used to do, which is progressive overload with the simple exercises, big compound lifts, progressive overload, simple, 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 that'll get you somewhere. But you're usually not going to see that on YouTube and TikTok.
Yeah, the two things that I want to tie this up with. Number one, those women who have dieted for years and still don't have the physique they want are also the ones who have always been trying to diet and have never taken time off. Just to sum up what I said before, if you're always trying to diet for summer, literally because you need more than the 8 months away from summer building muscle, if you're always on and off because it's either dieting or not dieting and actually learning how to build a physique, because it's not just dieting and then not dieting. And if you think that another fat loss phase is always the answer, or you keep your calories too low to play safe, that is the same thing. Or if you're always trying to keep a scale under a certain number, that is the same thing.
Or if you're eating, this is less common, but if you're eating enough but doing burpees instead of bench press, your training
needs to send the right stimulus. So
people say, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to throw it in here real quick. People say that it's 80% diet and 20% training. No. It's 100% diet and 100% training. They are equal parts.
But there is one thing that's more important, and it's 500% mindset, because you will never go anywhere where your mindset won't take you. You can't separate psychology from physiology. And I've had clients who, like, before macros was a thing, I wrote their diet plans, and for the first time ever, they were actually losing fat because of the fact that they didn't realize that, like, because they didn't know what their calories were, because they didn't know that I had them on a particular calorie range and this was their macros, whatever else, they weren't so focused on the restriction mindset. That's why, to me, because to me, it's not either a fat loss phase, we're going to focus on fat loss, or we're going to focus on building muscle. No, it's always a mindset and performance focus, because it's focusing on the mindset, on the performance, on the health. That's going to drive the needle all the time, because we still want to fuel for performance when we're in a fat loss phase. The last thing that I wanted to tie this up with is this is why the hybrid training, the running stuff, that is all bullshit for you to look at, thinking that that's what's going to lean you out and not bulk up your muscle. And that's going to lead to lean muscle, not bulky muscle, because it's not that got them there. It's the fact that they spent all the time building muscle before without a focus on cardio, because cardio was bullshit back then. And then they added in the cardio to now have some health elements. So I would say go all in on building muscle before you think about adding any extra cardio, unless you can feel that and also recover from that. So that's where I'm leaving that. Be realistic with knowing where your inputs are to be able to get the outputs. Is there anything else that you want to say?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to leave off on. Is your strength training is to change how you look. Your cardio is for your health, and your nutrition is for all of the above. Again, my takeaway is generally almost always going to be keep it simple, be realistic, and just don't overcomplicate things. Focus on practice, skill acquisition. My main takeaways here for you, again, it should be simple and repetitive. And you should be able to track progress in the terms of, I got better today. My skill improved, my weight improved, or I did more reps that were clean and they looked better than last week. You're on the right track to build some muscle. Keep doing that. Eventually, you'll hit that ceiling where you are training hard enough that you're stimulating some very serious muscle growth. But you'll know when you get there because you'll be able to see it already in the mirror. If you just focus on getting better, go in, don't work out, don't train. Practice, but practice with ever increasing demands. Small, no more than 1% increases. Don't get greedy.
Yeah, I love
small.
That. Small. Little by little, a little becomes a lot, but you can't get the lots without the littles. So with that, I love you all, and you will see me, hear me, and see Brandon and hear him on the next part of this TV series.
Until next week.
Bye. Hi. I will send you a message on WhatsApp.
Okay.
No, right. you wait. Okay. Bye.
Oh.
I just started the other one by accident. I'm like, I have to let Sarah in. I just opened the I just opened theirs so they know that I'm coming. But I'll send you a message on WhatsApp, and yeah, I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye, Ruby.
Bye.